Do you believe that ancient wisdom can help modern people? As requested by our subscriber, today we are talking about The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason. This inspiring book is an exposition on financial management through the parable stories of ancient Babylonian merchants. Let's first look at a true story. Going back over 80 years. In 1934, a professor of archaeology at the University of Nottingham received 5 clay tablets excavated by the British archaeological team in Babylon. He deciphered the cuneiform text on them. Guess what was written? It turned out not to be a serious and dry historical document, but content that was very warm and emotional. It was an autobiography of a Babylonian slave named Dabasir, who detailed in a diary-like fashion how he cleared his debts and even made a fortune. At that time, the professor and his wife were also burdened with a huge old debt, and they suddenly discovered an unprecedented method of debt repayment. Why not give it a try? Thus, following Dabasir's method, the professor couple managed to clear their debts. The story of Dabasir's debt repayment comes from this book, The Richest Man in Babylon, which also contains many stories about meticulous budgeting and wealth building. Today, let's talk about this book. The author, George S. Clason, was a famous businessman in America in the last century with a deep background in the publishing industry and a master of finance. Starting in 1926, he published some pamphlets teaching financial management, all in the form of parables and stories. Reading them is like listening to grandparents telling touching fairy tales. Among them, the most popular is this book, The Richest Man in Babylon. For nearly a century, this book has inspired countless ordinary people on the path to wealth. Many companies, banks, and insurance companies have purchased and distributed it to their employees. Although this book was born more than half a century ago, it has been translated into many languages and continues to sell well to this day, making it a classic Western motivational book. Thus, Clason is also known as a pioneer of modern financial education. In the book, Clason recounts the secrets of success of several super-rich Babylonians. What's the secret? It's quite simple. Actually, you just need to understand 2 things. One is savings, and the other is investment. Although the principle is simple, putting it into practice really requires some thought. Next, we will talk about how to save and how to invest in this book. Part 1. Saving. First, let's talk about savings. Speaking of savings, many people might say, what's there to discuss? Obviously, the more you earn, the more you can save. But if your income is not much and you insist on saving, it will lower your quality of life. But the book does not see it that way, repeatedly emphasizing one point. If you are willing to save 1/10 of your income, then you are already on the path to wealth. From the experiences of several Babylonian merchants in the book, this method is easy to operate and very effective. Arkad, like many young Babylonians, survived by working for others. He worked as a scribe in the records office, working long hours every day, diligently carving cuneiform text on clay tablets, day in and day out, month after month. He worked hard, but the pay was pitifully small, and various expenses depleted all his income. Does this situation sound familiar? Many of us, in the first few years after graduating from school, if not in high-paying jobs, are basically living paycheck to paycheck. As a good young man in Babylon, Arkad was poor but ambitious. He always had a belief in becoming rich but struggled to find a way until one day he met the moneylender Algamish. This wealthy Babylonian told Arkad a good method. Algamish said, "When I decided to save a part of my income, I found I had discovered a way to wealth. You can do the same." The young scribe could hardly believe his ears. You might wonder, is this also called a method? But Algamish emphasized, this is enough to turn a shepherd into a moneylender. How about that? Unbelievable, right? Arkad, though skeptical, decided to give it a try. After all, Algamish was so wealthy, the power of example is infinite. Arkad felt that with such a small income, to have savings, he really had to tighten his belt, saving every possible penny, just to keep from starving. Then Algamish harshly criticized him, saying, "If you save 1/10 of your income every year, how much would you have after 10 years?" Arkad blurted out, "I could save as much as I earn in a year." Guess what? Algamish was still not satisfied. Shaking his head, he said, "You're only half right." It turns out that in the eyes of the successful moneylender, the earned money should not just sit there cold. It should be active, jumping around. The issue is how to activate them. According to Algamish, it's that every gold coin you save works for you. They are like your slaves. To possess endless wealth, one must not wait passively, but use the saved money to make more money. And the money earned must also be used to earn more, achieving a snowball effect. Arkad was half convinced, but still tried to save money according to the moneylender's method. Each time he received his pay, he first took out 1/10 of the bronze coins to save. After a few months, he was somewhat surprised by the situation. This way of saving money did not affect his usual expenses at all. It did not feel any different from when he didn't save money before. Of course, everyone likes nice things. Sometimes, as Arkad walked down the street, he couldn't help but want to splurge. But the thought of saving seemed to have sprouted, and he could resist the temptation every time. Later, Arkad used the saved money for investment. It was hard at the beginning. After paying some tuition in the form of losses, he eventually found a way to wealth. When Algamish realized this young man had learned how to make money with money, he decided to put Arkad's name in his list of partners, helping him manage his property. Arkad was fortunate to take over Algamish's vast property and through hard work, expanded it greatly. He himself became quite wealthy in the process. After Algamish's death, Arkad legally inherited part of his estate, and guess what? He eventually became the richest man in Babylon. After hearing this story, we see that the starting point for becoming rich can be very simple financial measures. Don't worry about the quality of life. The problem is that we often confuse necessary expenses with endless desires. If we carefully study our own living habits, we probably won't find it difficult to identify some expenses that can be reduced or completely avoided, such as some unnecessary social expenses. Some might say, Arkad became rich because he was lucky to be noticed by Algamish and inherited his estate. But it's not really that. Think about it. The reason Arkad was chosen is because he persistently saved 1/10 of his income, proving his unwavering will. Indeed, that is the case. Where could there be such a thing as pie falling from the sky? The key to Arkad's success still comes from his own efforts, but remember, he didn't start with unrealistic tasks, but chose things within his capabilities to do and persist, advancing calmly step by step. What happened to Arkad later? By the time he was 70, he had become the #1 wealthy man in Babylon, nationally renowned. How famous was he? Famous enough that the king of Babylon invited him as a guest of honor. Here's what happened. Previously, through years of building canals and temples and other grand projects, Babylon had created great prosperity for the country and brought substantial income to the people. But once these infrastructure projects were completed, people's lives had no direction and suddenly fell into difficulty. The king of Babylon was anxious. What to do? Hoping in the youth, he ordered 100 ambitious young people to be selected as the flowers of the motherland, the pillars of the future, to do what? Mainly to learn about finance. Study finance? You need old drivers to lead the way, so he sent people to invite Arkad, this financial expert, to train them in how to become wealthy, starting from scratch. Arkad first taught the method, which you might have guessed. Yes, it's the method of saving 1/10 of the income. Arkad said to a young egg seller, "You can try to put 10 eggs in your basket every morning, then take out 9 in the evening. Keep it up, and sooner or later the basket will be too full to fit more." At the same time, make a budget for expenses so you can live, not just survive but live decently, under the premise of not spending more than 9/10 of your income. According to this method, the students' empty wallets gradually bulged up. This is the financial wisdom of Babylon. The wealth here is created by the people who love to think. If you were born in Babylon, then the most important thing in life is to learn how to become a wealthy person. Do you remember Dabasir we talked about at the beginning? Now let's talk about his story again. In fact, Dabasir was not originally a slave, but a free citizen of Babylon. Because of youthful indulgence, he incurred huge debts, which forced him to flee Babylon, but by mistake, he was captured and taken to Syria, becoming a slave. With the help of a kind slave master's wife, he escaped back to Babylon, and Dabasir resolved to defeat his only enemy, debt. Dabasir's method of repaying debts was exactly the same as Arkad's method of getting rich, that is, strictly according to the plan, saving a part of the money, using a part for living expenses, and also setting aside a part specifically for repaying debts. Every full moon, Dabasir received his salary, which was an important day for his family each month. They would save 1/10 of their income. Even if life was tough, Dabasir and his wife would only use 7/10 of their income for living and use 2/10 to repay debts. They did their best to repay the debts and also tried to make money with their savings. Dabasir had a special skill. He was very familiar with camels, knowing how to pick strong and healthy camels. So he seized the opportunity to buy some high-quality camels, made a small attempt, and earned 42 silver coins. In the end, Dabasir repaid all the debts he had previously owed. He discovered that repaying debts is actually much easier than running away from them. These experiences were engraved by him on clay tablets, and many years later, they crossed time and space, becoming a guidebook to help a British couple repay their debts. It seems that ancient wisdom is still not outdated today. We just talked about how to save. Let's summarize a bit. Saving does not lower the quality of life, because it can help you distinguish which expenses are unnecessary. By saving 1/10 of your income, you are already on the road to wealth, and every penny you save makes them work for you. Making money with money. Gradually rolling the snowball. From the experiences of several Babylonian merchants in the book, this method is easy to operate and very effective. You might as well try it starting today. Next, let's take a look at another thing: how to invest, or how to make money with money. Part 2. Investment. Of course, there are many specific methods for investment, but the most important principle remains the same. First, let's talk about the issue of investment risk. How do you view this issue? To invest is to take risks. The greater the risk, the more you earn. This view is all too familiar, right? But in the view of the wealthy Babylonians, this idea is completely untenable. Making money from investments has a prerequisite, which must ensure capital safety, so you definitely can't invest blindly. Earlier, we talked about Arkad's initial investments and the tuition he paid. Let's see. What losses did he suffer? After saving money for a year, Arkad wanted to use money to make money. What kind of investment did he think of? He remembered a bricklayer he knew. This guy often went out to sea on long voyages, just happened to introduce Arkad to a business, saying he could help buy some high-quality gems produced in Phoenicia at the port of Tyre and sell them at a high price when he returned, splitting the money earned between the two of them. This way of making money seemed too easy. Arkad thought, I don't have to leave home, and I can make big money. The bricklayer's promise sounded so beautiful. Why not? But contrary to expectations, tragedy struck. The gems the Phoenicians sold to the bricklayer looked dazzling, but were actually worthless little glass pieces. The poor bricklayer had no ability to distinguish them. Algamish heard about this and appeared just in time. This time, he brought Arkad some advice. You must distinguish which advice is worth following and which is completely useless or even completely wrong. He said believing a bricklayer knows about jewels is simply ridiculous. Learning financial knowledge from someone with no financial experience is doomed to lose everything, a total loss of principle. Think about it. Haven't we also done such foolish things? From our aunts, uncles, and neighbors, we heard some news and blindly followed the trend to buy some financial products, only to wake up when we lost money, realizing that the person who advised us to buy this product was a complete amateur. Arkad was Arkad after all. Although his first savings were wasted, he was not knocked down. Everything started again, continuing to save 1/10 of his income from his salary every month. Fortunately, he had gradually developed such a habit. Starting to save money from scratch was not too difficult. When investing again, Arkad learned his lesson, looking everywhere for experts in the business. Finally finding a craftsman who made bronze shields. Arkad heard that this craftsman was short of funds, so he entrusted his savings to him, letting him use the money to buy bronze for making shields. This was like investing capital. The craftsman's shields were of good quality and had a wider market, so he paid Arkad an interest every 4 months as a return. Arkad's journey of investment and financial management truly began from here. Those 100 young Babylonians heard Arkad share this experience in person. They began to understand a principle: to make every coin work. Like a herd constantly reproducing, the key is to refer to the advice of insiders when investing, leaving professional matters to professional people to handle. Arkad was not just teaching these flowers of Babylon about life experience. Before this, his most important teaching object was his own son, Nomast. Unlike many rich second-generation youths today, Nomast did not receive his father's care in his youth. He wasn't sitting on mountains of gold and silver and directly inheriting the family business. Arkad's way of educating was to let his son go out and struggle on his own. He gave Nomast a bag of gold and a clay tablet. The gold was travel and startup capital. Arkad wrote down his summarized 5 rules of gold on it. These rules sound not profound, but are a summary of wisdom, emphasizing starting to accumulate wealth from savings, more about how to invest. Arkad repeatedly emphasized that for the gold already in hand, it must be properly protected. To invest prudently, trust the eyes and advice of professionals, and stay away from scammers and schemers' incitements. Arkad wanted Nomast to rely on these 2 things. To travel the world for 10 years, he set a rule for his son. He must first go through hardships and prove he truly had the ability and wisdom to acquire wealth. Only then could he inherit the family business. 10 years later, Nomast returned to Babylon as scheduled. His father held a grand banquet for him. In the presence of friends and relatives, Nomast recounted his 10-year experience. When he first arrived in a new city, he became the target of scammers. Because of his lack of experience, he was continuously deceived, spending a whole bag of gold in no time. A rich young master fallen on hard times. What a tragedy! But Nomast inherited Arkad's indomitable spirit. He did not become despondent. He remembered his father's clay tablet, drawing strength from it. Fortunately, Nomast found a job, managing the slaves building the new city walls. This gave him an opportunity to start practicing the 5 rules of gold on the clay tablet. What did Nomast do? He first saved a copper coin from his first income. Does this sound familiar? It seems the simplest methods are often the most effective. Once he had some savings, Nomast and the master of these slaves became friends. Soon, an opportunity to make big money came. The slave master discovered that the area lacked metal, and after the city walls were built, the most important job was to install large, thick bronze doors at each entrance. Obviously, at that time, whoever had metal would make a fortune. Just do it. They organized a caravan to go to a distant mine, bringing back the metals used for making the city gates. Because they were well prepared, they indeed succeeded greatly. the king bought their exclusively supplied metals at a high price. Nomast made his first fortune, laying the foundation for his later greater success. What does this show? It shows that newcomers to investment can only make a big hit under the guidance of experienced predecessors. Old drivers are not for nothing. Let's understand how to avoid risks from another perspective. This story happened to Algamish's colleague, Mason, who was also a successful moneylender in Babylon. One evening, Mason's friend came to him, saying he was troubled. It turns out his friend's sister had always hoped her husband would become a wealthy merchant, but felt he had never encountered any good opportunities. Now that her brother had made a windfall, she ran to ask her brother to lend the gold coins to her husband for business. Once he made money, he would repay his brother. This made his friend very embarrassed. We probably have also encountered such things in life. A friend comes to borrow money wanting to invest, but the thing they want to do sounds unreliable. Yet refusing feels awkward, making it difficult to know what to do. Let's see what Mason advised. This smart moneylender, after listening to his friend's troubles, did not answer directly, but told a fable. There was a farmer who could understand animal language. One evening he heard a bull complaining to a donkey in his farm about how it had to pull the plow from morning to night, barely having a chance to breathe, while the donkey only needed to carry the master out. If the master didn't want to go somewhere, it could comfortably eat grass and rest all day. A world of difference, making the bull very indignant. The donkey was quick-witted. It suggested that the bull lie down and pretend to be sick when the slave came to harness the plow in the morning. The next morning, the bull took the donkey's advice. The slave indeed reported back to the farmer that the bull was sick and couldn't pull the plow. Guess what the farmer's answer was? Just harness the donkey and let it work instead of the bull. As a result, the donkey, who had intended to help a friend, worked all day long, its legs tired, its heart in pain, really a case of losing more by trying to gain a little. After this, the donkey and the bull never spoke to each other again. Their friendship sank to the bottom of the sea. Mason said this fable teaches a lesson that helping a friend is certainly a good thing, but don't let it backfire. There's no need to shift others' burdens onto yourself. How did Mason himself do when lending money? He would precisely judge whether the borrower had the ability to repay, requiring every borrower to leave something as collateral. Long-term practice told Mason that the safest loans were to those whose own properties were greater than the loan amount, or at the very least, to someone with a personal credit foundation and earning ability. All in all, avoiding risks and successful lending is an undeniable truth. This is also what Heralded reminded in the lecture hall. Speaking of what kind of investment is more assured, Heralded specifically mentioned the issue of houses, that is to invest in real estate. Owning your own house. Thus, a house is a completely valuable property and can continuously generate profit. This sounds very harmonious to us living today. On the issue of houses, it seems that there is little difference between ancient and modern times across cultures. Whether lending money or buying a house, it's all about ensuring future income is continuous and secure. Let's summarize a bit. The above stories all illustrate one principle, that is, investment should be rational and cautious, not blindly pursuing high profits. On projects that can provide the expected return, reasonable profits are fine. In short, avoid unrealistic investments. Is it that as long as you are careful and cautious, you can definitely make big money? Nothing is absolute. We just emphasized not to take risks easily when investing, but that doesn't mean you should always hesitate and be indecisive. In fact, according to this book, if you want to make more money through investment, you need to be both cautious and decisive. These two aspects seem a bit contradictory, but actually, they complement each other. If you don't believe it, let's look at the counterexamples mentioned in the book. Let's talk about Heralded again. He not only taught young people financial experience, but also discussed topics about wealth in the lecture hall in Babylon with many people. An older businessman first told his experience. Many years ago when he was young, just married, his father suggested he manage a large piece of wasteland outside the walls of Babylon. Because this place was higher than the canal, no water could reach there. A friend of his father was ready to buy this land by building 3 large water wheels to pump canal water up for irrigation. After transforming this wasteland into fertile land, the plan was to divide it into several small plots of farmland, selling them to city residents to cultivate, making a big profit. Unfortunately, despite his father's repeated suggestions, the businessman still did not join this plan in time. Why? It's embarrassing to say. It turns out he was dazzled by beautiful long robes brought from the East, using his money to enjoy the happiness that dressing up brought him. Hedonism kills people, but doesn't this kind of thing often happen around us? For a moment of pleasure, neglecting the real work, picking up sesame seeds and losing watermelons. How did the wasteland transformation plan go? The final profit exceeded everyone's expectations. His friend made so much money he couldn't walk. Not surprisingly, the businessman deeply regretted his hesitation. He said this story fully illustrates that hesitating in the face of opportunities, after careful consideration, still not taking action, will let good fortune slip away right beside you. A middle-aged livestock dealer also couldn't help speaking up. He too missed a golden opportunity. Here's what happened. He spent 10 days outside looking to buy camels. This trip was fruitless, truly frustrating. One evening, the middle-aged man returned to Babylon. The city gates were already closed. This aggravating situation made him very annoyed. He had to set up tents with the slaves outside the city to spend the night. At that time, a farmer also locked outside the city ran over to him, wanting to sell him a flock of sheep just driven here. The reason was his wife suddenly became seriously ill. He had to rush back to take care of her. The livestock dealer was moved. He was very experienced. From the sheep's bleating, he could tell this was a quality flock of sheep, and the farmer's price was also very reasonable. But in the dark, he couldn't count exactly how many sheep there were, not knowing if the farmer's claim of 900 was exaggerated. The middle-aged dealer insisted on waiting until daylight to count the sheep before willing to pay the farmer. The next morning, an unexpected thing happened. While the middle-aged dealer was still asleep, the city gates opened. 4 merchants hurried out of the city, buying the flock from the farmer. It turns out the city was under siege by enemy forces. Food was scarce. In a rush, they offered a price 3 times the previous price. The farmer, of course, accepted this price without hesitation, selling the flock to the city's merchants. When the middle-aged man woke up, the opportunity that belonged to him, the chance to make a big profit, had just brushed past him. Opportunities are sometimes like this, arriving unexpectedly one evening. The first judgment that appears in our minds is often the best, and many times, it's our hesitation that causes us to miss great opportunities. What kind of person is always favored by the goddess of fortune? The answer in the book is those who act decisively. In the field of investment, it seems that action is as important as risk awareness. That's the essence of this book. Click the description below the video to find the link to the book we've prepared for you. Welcome to read it. You can also share this book with your friends. Congratulations, you've finished another book.